Hey guys, I hate to interrupt, but I just wanted to take a moment to say if you're studying for the CPA exams and you like the visual learning approach that we take in this video, definitely check out Universal CPA Review's free trial. You can do this by going to www.universalcpareview.com, or you can click on the link in the description of this video. From there, you could take a sneak peek at Universal's platform, which includes animated video lectures, study guides, and practice questions with task-based simulations that come with video explanations that walk you through the solution step by step, kind of like having a tutor by your side. Okay, enough of that. Let's get back to it.
Okay, so non-qualified stock option, situation number 2. We have a non-qualified stock option without a readily ascertainable value. So if having a readily ascertainable value indicates that the options are being traded on an open exchange, that means that if they don't have a readily ascertainable value, obviously they are not being traded in the open market. So let's say that Home Goodies is a startup company, right? And in order to incentivize Dan the Man to join them with all of his strategic expertise, they offer him these types of stock options. And because, again, this is a startup and they haven't IPO'd yet, that means that the stock options do not have a readily ascertainable value, right? You can't just look up on your Fidelity app and see what the market price is. Okay, so let's pull out our mental map once again. Question number 1, when is ordinary income getting recognized to Dan the Man, the recipient of these non-qualified stock options without a readily ascertainable value? So if the non-qualified stock options do not have a readily ascertainable value, that means ordinary income will be recognized as of the exercise date. Right, remember, if they have a readily ascertainable value, they're getting recognized as of the grant date. Okay, but now they're getting recognized as of the exercise date. This is the date that Dan would exercise the options and cash them in. Okay, so if that is the case, that means he would first need to buy back the options and then subsequently sell them at the fair market value. Okay, so the fair market value, aka the selling price, less the exercise price, is going to be the amount that Dan would recognize as ordinary income at the exercise date. So in this situation, if they ask you a question about the amount that is recognized as of the grant date, the answer would always be 0. Okay, so remember, day 1 is the grant date, day 2 is the exercise date. In order for options to be exercised, they must first be granted to the recipient. Okay, so step 2 is determining the basis. Okay, so the basis of the stock is going to be determined as the fair market value of the stock when the option is exercised. Okay, so the basis is going to be the fair market value of the stock when that stock option is exercised. Okay, so that's important to keep in mind. This would be different from the calculation of basis had the non-qualifying stock option had a readily ascertainable value, right? If it did have a readily ascertainable value, we would take ordinary income from step 1 and add it to the amount as of the exercise price. Okay, so just important to see the key differences. And then as of step 3, we're going to determine the capital gain at the exercise date. Okay, so the capital gain at the exercise date would be the fair market value less that adjusted basis that we determined in step 2. And then finally in step 4, we're now determining the employer's deduction. Okay, so if Home Goodies is distributing this stock option, that is compensation that is deductible. The question is, when is it deductible? They're going to always be able to take the deduction in the same period that the taxpayer recognized ordinary income. Okay, so they're going to recognize their deduction as of the exercise date because that's when Dan the Man would recognize ordinary income. Okay, and it's always going to match that amount. If Dan the Man is taking this amount as ordinary income, that means that the employer can deduct this amount from ordinary income. Okay, and one more thing to keep in mind is if the taxpayer does not exercise these options, that means that they would lapse. And what you need to keep in mind is that if the stock options lapse, aka they're not exercised, then there's going to be a capital loss that would result. And this amount would result as the same amount as the option price. Okay, so the amount that Dan would pay to buy back the options is the amount that the employee can take as a capital loss deduction. Okay, and keep in mind that's different from a situation where if the non-qualified options had a readily ascertainable value. Right, that situation would result in the capital loss being deductible as of the same amount that was previously taxed as ordinary income.
Let's take a quick break and catch our breath. Woo. If you like what you see in this video, well, you're not alone. Okay, many students who studied with Universal CPA Review have found a ton of success. And if you don't believe me, you could take a look at our reviews on Trustpilot. Trustpilot is the most legitimate third-party review site that ensures that our reviews are completely legitimate. Universal CPA Review is not only the best CPA exam study option for visual learners, but it's also the most cost-effective option out there. So if you've already spent thousands of dollars on another CPA review course, we totally understand, and we want to help you out. So take a look at our free 7-day trial and see if Universal CPA Review is for you. You can start your free trial by going to www.universalcpareview.com, or you could take a look at the link in the description of this video.
Okay, so taking a look at a quick example where Dan is now receiving 100 non-qualified employee stock options, but only this time the options do not have a readily ascertainable value. Okay, so each option will provide Dan the right to purchase 10 shares of the company's stock for $10 per share. Dan received the options 4 years ago when the stock was trading at $15 per share. So Dan exercised all of the options when the stock was trading at $70 per share. So this question wants to know what amount is Dan going to recognize as ordinary income. So what's key to note here is that these non-qualified stock options do not have a readily ascertainable value. So if they do not have a readily ascertainable value, we can't just look up what the stock or the option is trading for on the open market. So that means that we can't value the stock options and therefore recognize them as income until we go ahead and exercise them. Okay, so this situation will result in the taxability of the stock options as ordinary income as of the exercise date. Okay, remember, if this had an ascertainable value, it would be at the grant date. But again, because it does not have a readily ascertainable value, it's going to be valued as of the exercise date. Okay, so Dan is going to exercise these options, meaning he's going to buy them back at the $10 per share price. Okay, so we got 100 options that are going to be repurchased and converted into 10 shares, which will be purchased at the $10 per share price. Okay, so it's going to be $10,000. This is the cost to repurchase and therefore exercise these options. So because the options were exercised when the stock was trading at $70 per share, we're going to have a gain of $60 per share. Okay, so $70,000 would result from the same 100 options converted into 10 shares at $70 per share. Okay, so the difference between that exercise price and the fair market value of the options would be $60,000. Okay, so on the surface it might look like this is a gain because we're taking the difference between the two, but remember, we're recognizing the difference as ordinary income when we are making the determination for non-qualified options as of the exercise date. Right, again, because this does not have a readily ascertainable value.